So, as the sign says there, welcome to the 2015 San Diego State of the Foundation Conference. What I try to do every year with this presentation is just give you an overview of sort of what the Foundation has been doing since the last national conference and a sense of how we're developing, how we're progressing, and recognize that that's what it is. It's a progress report. We keep moving forward. We started 60-some years ago, and there are some of us around here who've been around almost that same amount of time and involved with the Foundation. And I think for those of you who know Esther Land, we've seen a lot of progress in these years. We haven't agreed with all of it necessarily, but there's been a lot of progress, and that's the important thing. And this message sums it all up right here. John Adams said, and as Bob Ruff here and we like to quote historical figures and precedents in the United States, to do good and be good is all we have to do. And if you think about that, and if you do nothing else but take that message away from this meeting, you will have taken a really significant message away, because don't just take it away, live it. And that's really the key. And everybody in this room obviously does that because you've been actively involved with the organization, some of you for many years. I didn't put up the usual mission statement because I think everybody knows it. It's in all of the books. But the key points of the mission statement, what are we really about? And obviously finding the cure is the ultimate goal. That's our vision. It's long term. But in the meantime, we focus on education and awareness, patient services, advocacy, and research. Those are pretty broad terms, and we'll talk a little bit about what it is that we do in each of those areas to give you a flavor. So in terms of education and awareness, and this is one of the areas that we've spent a lot of time on in the last several years, because we recognized, for a variety of reasons, that the Foundation really was not reaching and serving the total MG population. And not because we didn't want to, but because we didn't necessarily know how to do it. We didn't have the tools. They needed to be developed in some cases, and we had to figure out how to take advantage of the technology that was out there and available to us. So one of the things that you're all familiar with is all the brochures that we put out. And those are all reviewed on an evergreen basis by our Medical Scientific Advisory Board to ensure that the information in those is correct and accurate. A number of years ago, we had those brochures translated into Spanish, and somewhere along the line, they got lost. And so we haven't had them. But in the last year and a half, we've made an effort to get those retranslated, working with the Nurses Advisory Board and the MSAB. And most of those are now translated into Spanish, and all of them will be eventually and available so that we can expand our outreach and awareness into the Hispanic community, which is an important segment of the United States today. Our website, which is up there, myasthenia.org, if you've not gone to it, you really should. It provides an awful lot of information, and some people will tell you it provides too much. And it's confusing. And we actually don't disagree with that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're changing that. We're working on that project this year. But there is a lot of good, solid information on there, and information on where support groups are, where they meet, the times of their meetings, and so forth. Facebook, we got active on last year, or a year and a half ago, and that has provided a tremendous opportunity for us to get the word out, and it's a very successful program for us. So again, if you've not been on the MGFA Facebook page, I encourage you to do it and share your thoughts. Foundation-focused newsletter. We've switched that to twice a year. That's the print edition that you get, the magazine, and hopefully we will get everybody over time to switch to the electronic version. It's a much more cost-effective way to deliver information, and it allows us to produce an even bigger foundation focus than we might otherwise produce just because of the costs that are in that. So in the foundation focus, we listen to you, the patient community, and the caregivers over the years, and you are telling us that one of the things you want to hear about is more about what's happening in research. Don't wait till the national conference to have Ted Burns or Henry Kaminsky or one of the other doctors give us an update on research, but provide it a little bit more frequently if you can. And so we've come up with this column that Dr. Silvestri and Gil Wolf, the former chair of the MSAB, produced, and it's what's hot off the press. And hopefully you read that and enjoy it. That column is going to be expanded. It's all about what's happening currently in research. And then we've expanded this section. We call it News from the Field. We go out and ask each of you who are involved with the support group or chapters to tell us what's happening in your area. What are you doing? What's new? What are you trying? And we published that. And this last issue, I think we had 2 or 3 pages of information from support groups and chapters, and we hope that in the edition that's going to print now that there'll be even more information. E-newsletters and email blasts. This is another attempt to get information out to you, the MG community, in a more current fashion. The Foundation Focus is more of a magazine format. This is more of a important kind of news that comes out quickly. The webinars, hopefully some of you have participated in. This is an effort that we've started in the last year and a half. Bob Ruff back here did one of them on pregnancy. Charlene Hafer-Mako did one on exercise. There's another one in the works. So this is an ongoing effort. There are going to be lots of webinars. The goal is to get at least one a month. Whether or when we get there is a problematic question, but the point to remember is that's what we're trying to do, and it's starting to work. We're learning in that game. The first webinar we did was a little rough. The technology didn't work the way we thought it was going to work, but we had a lot of participants. And that's the important thing. And those webinars will be available on the website. So if you didn't participate, you can go back and view it. And we've done the same thing with the podcasts. We've been doing those over several years, and every podcast is available to you on the website, and you can download it, view it, however you want to do it. And the annual conference, this meeting of the foundation, we record all of the presentations. And they are made available to the chapters and support groups in the form of a DVD, so that you can share it with all of the people who didn't have the opportunity to come to this meeting. One of the things that we're talking about, and it's in the talking stage, is shifting off of an annual conference and making it a biannual conference. And in the off year, having what I'll call regional or local conferences on a Saturday. The idea, again, reduce the cost to you and put you in a position where more people can come together from a geographic area to share information and to learn. It's one of the things that's in discussion phase now, and hopefully within the next several years we'll be able to roll that out. June Awareness Month, sort of an oxymoron in a sense. MG Awareness is every month, every day, every week. And I think all of you know that. But in terms of a project, June is the month, and that's the month we tend to focus on. We put out a toolkit for you to use. We don't expect that everybody in this room is a PR expert by any stretch of the imagination, but we give you a variety of tools that you can use, you can try, and we'll provide the help to make that happen. The Twitter, we have our own Twitter account now, which is at #myasthenia.org. And again, we encourage you to go to that and tweet, whatever the correct word is, about what you're doing. I mean, that's what people do. They tell others what they're doing, and you'll see a little later a very interesting program that is sort of taken off, and I'll show you a brief thing on that. And then the walks. This program is basically 4 years old. it was our first real initiative at a national awareness program, and it's paid dividends in many, many ways. A lot of people think about it as a fundraising program, and it is. There's no question about it. It costs a lot of money to run it, and we make a reasonable return on that. But the biggest return is the awareness, and that's played out in a number of ways, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. And then there's the other side of the equation. The first side is educating the patient community and the caregiver, and those are some of the things that we did there. The other side is the professional community, the doctors and the nurses and the researchers. It seems odd to talk about the need to educate them, but each of you, if you think about it, probably has gone somewhere in your lifespan to a doctor who didn't recognize your myasthenia initially. It probably took you 5 to 7 years to get an accurate diagnosis unless you lived in a major center where the doctors really are knowledgeable about myasthenia. And so we said, okay, how do we broaden that? How do we start to really reach out to that community? One of the ways on an international basis, and this goes back to the founding of the foundation, is our International Symposium on Myasthenia Gravis and Related Diseases. That meeting was held last in 2012. It's every 5 years. We had the largest attendance in the history of the foundation, over 300 people from around the world. These are researchers and clinicians. The next one is in Washington, D.C. in 2017. It's going to be at George Washington University. We do this in conjunction with the New York Academy of Sciences. We expect that to be a spectacular meeting. First of all, because it's in Washington, you have the ability to get the NIH participants in addition to the international participants, and just people like to go to Washington. So we think that's going to be a great meeting. The scientific sessions are something that we've done every year at the fall meeting of the foundation. And that is basically an opportunity for the scientific community or the clinicians to present their latest research results. And Bob Ruff over the years has generously taken his time to translate all of that into English so that all of us can actually understand what they're talking about. And that usually comes out right after that meeting. That meeting has gone from about attendance of 25, 30 people in the old days to we're over close to almost 200 people attending now. And that is fantastic because what we're seeing is it's a lot more younger clinicians and researchers showing up and talking about their work. And if you think about it, that's really the important thing here. We've got to get the younger, the new generation or the generation following that involved in MG and taking it seriously and understanding it and understanding its issues. The CE program for nurses is, we started that about 5 years ago, and that's been a tremendous success. We had over 25 people registered for last night's CE program that the nurses run. And then the professional manual, which you got a number of years ago, and the Wisconsin chapter was a great supporter of that in terms of helping us get it printed and the initial distribution. And hopefully you've all got a copy of that either in hard form or on a CD. They're still available, but we've now taken that and turned it into an iBook so that physicians and emergency responders have this tool that they can refer to in real time. That is basically the existing manual with some small updates. But we are in the process of adding several new chapters, and and this is going to allow us to update and upgrade that manual on an ongoing basis. A lot easier once you've got it in an iBook form than when you have it in a hardback form. So that I think is exciting, and we're taking advantage of technology there. Then we have patient services, and I purposely chose to put the MyMG phone app under patient services and to use it as the introductory slide, because the concept here, and again, it's not perfect, the concept here is to give each person a tool so that they can start to manage their MG, because it is their MG or your MG. This tool has been updated a couple of times, and it's now, the board just approved yesterday the funding for another update, which is allow us, for those of you who have smartphones and you sign up for some of these websites that run a stream across the bottom giving you current news or current sports data. That's what we're doing with this iPhone. So you're going to be able, or not the iPhone, but the smartphone, you're going to be able, if you're on the MyMG, you're going to be getting almost like a tweet, current information flowing across your phone, telling you about something that's going on or that you can use. So we're trying to take this tool and continue to enhance it to make it more valuable to you in how you manage your MG, giving you another tool. In fact, it came up in yesterday's board meeting. One of the things that people don't seem to know about it is we want you to collect this data about how your MG is doing so that you can take that to your doctor when you go in for whenever your appointment is. And your doctor says, "How are you doing?" Here's how I'm doing. It's not trying to think back over the last month or 2 months, but I've been tracking it. So the easy way to do it is if you go to the website, you actually can download your data and then print it out. So you can take in a printed copy to your physician. And we encourage you to do that. It makes, given the 15 minutes that you get these days, it makes it more efficient. At least you've provided them with a record. So we encourage you to do it. The next area under patient services, and this is an area that you can slice and dice in a million different ways, and I'm sure people will disagree with the way I'm doing it, but it's allowing me to at least talk about it in an organized way. Support groups. It's one of the critical keys to patient support. And I said one, because it is only one thing that we do, or one thing that you do. And so I'm going to just talk about support groups. There are 38 chapter support groups around the country today. There are 20 that are in the North American, what we call the North American support groups. They are support groups that we created where we didn't have chapters. And how did we create this? And as you see there are 6 more in preliminary stages of development. How did this happen? It goes back to the walks. As we created awareness, and particularly in areas where we didn't have a chapter, people raised their hand and said, "We want to get involved. What can we do? We want to organize a support group." And the national organization has been working with those individuals over the last 18 months to make that happen. And to me, when we hit 26 or 30 of those support groups that we've helped from the national perspective to get off the ground, that is significant. That is a significant change. Those are all new people reaching out and getting the word out. And that's again, an important part. And if you look at the map, which I think says we're a national organization, but we really aren't a national organization. There's lots of parts of the country that there are no support groups or chapters. And this was just to give you a flavor of what it looks like. And obviously, some of those locations overlap into other locations. But the idea here is to just give you a flavor of what the organization looks like in terms of support organizations, whether they be a chapter support groups, or other support groups. Now, what are the patient services? And again, this is just a list. What do we try to do? Who are the we, or who is the we? The we is all of you. It's the support groups that you belong to. It's the chapters you belong to. And we're about dealing with the patient, handling the call from the patient or the patient's caregiver, providing them information. And that may be just on a phone call. It may be with a visit. It may be with a brochure, a referral to other patients so that they can network, the physician's list. The list goes on, and everybody can add probably 2 or 3 things to that. But the idea is when somebody is diagnosed and their future caregiver and they themselves need and want information, where do they go? And we're trying to address that, because in the old days it was easy. You went to the chapter and to the chapter support groups. But now the technology is out there. The younger people, that's not their interest. They tend to go up on the web and they get information from a lot of other places. So one of our roles is to expand how we deliver these patient services and understand really what the technology is that other people are using. And we are in transition. We are in transition, and I'll say this because I am, from an old group like myself to younger people. We use technology, we communicate differently, we want information delivered. And this organization is in that transition period because we got a bunch of us, older folks, and we're now finding we got a bunch of young folks coming in and joining the foundation, being interested in what we're doing. So it's a tough juggling act, but I think we're doing it, and it's working reasonably well. Advocacy, and this is an area of the foundation's mission where, you know, it's been up and down because we don't necessarily have the expertise. And so what we've done is we've reached out and we belong to other organizations that have a strong advocacy program, and in fact, that's their core mission. And so we belong to ARDA and NORD, the National Health Council, which is the biggie, and that basically includes virtually all of the voluntary health organizations. And then the CNF, which is the Children's Neurology Foundation. And they all play a different role. And what we do is work directly with them on issues that they've identified. And we take a position, either support or not support. That's not the kind of advocacy program that the community deserves, but it's been the advocacy program we've been able to deliver. What's changing there? We're talking to one individual who is just stepping down as the advocacy chair of the AANEM. And he has agreed to chair, he is a lawyer and a doctor, he has agreed to chair an advocacy program of the MGFA and help us build it. And he has agreed to also chair a similar committee within the Medical Scientific Advisory Board. So for the first time, we're going to link those two in terms of advocacy. And we'll be able to talk about the big issues like national health care or increasing NIH funding. But at the same time, we will be able, using the MSAB, to organize around not individual patient issues, but patient issues as a group. So whether it's IVIG that seems to be getting turned down, or Mestinon, we hope to be able to take positions on those questions by organizing the people who are best able to talk about them. And hopefully by next year, you'll see some of that action actually taking place. And I'm going to read you one thing really quickly because I don't want to misstate it. We, as I said, work very closely with the National Health Council. And it's just a note that came out from them to us, telling us about progress that we are making together. And I have a feeling we will be coming back to each one of you down the road, asking you to join in this little exercise. But there is something called the 21st Century Cures Act in Congress, and it's being discussed on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. And its idea is to ensure that medicines which address chronic conditions with limited or no treatment options are brought to the market. That's a significant change in hopefully how you are going to be able to interact. We, and I use that term advisedly, but I think it's true, are encouraged that the committee has agreed to address this in their legislative draft, and it is only a draft. And we hope to finalize the language that will create appropriate incentives to encourage development of treatments of unmet medical needs. And we certainly fit in that category. In addition, and I think this is important too, in addition to the provisions that are identifying the drugs, because that's what that is, this bill also encourages or arguing for increased funding for the National Institutes of Health, which is critical to funding myasthenia research. And Henry Kaminsky and I have got an article in the next issue of the Foundation Focus, which hopefully will be on your doorsteps when you get home, talking about just that issue, that the NIH funding for myasthenia is virtually non-existent. They funded, 3 projects, Henry? 3 projects. Not very much. We need to get that increased. This bill starts to address that question. Another important part that from your perspective, it incorporates the patient perspective in the data that the FDA will use. So that is going to be significant. It focuses on reducing regulatory duplication and unnecessary delays in institutional review boards. Those are the IRBs. They're the people who slow the process down for good or bad because they review every word and every sentence that you want to put to paper about research. And basically allow patients to have their health information used for research. It's very difficult today without all kinds of pre-approvals. So those are just some of the things on the advocacy side that we probably do a crappy job of telling you about, but they're important, and we're actually doing them. We're engaged with the National Health Council and other organizations. Research and collaboration, and this, I'm probably the most proud of this thing. There was one other thing that I am too. But over the last 10, 12 years, we've put these standards in place, and they're international standards. And they started back in 2000, I believe, with one of our really great leaders who just passed away about a year ago, Henry Jaretsky out of New York. He was a neurosurgeon. And he pulled the group together internationally, and they created what's now called the gold standard, the international standards for clinical trials. And that's really significant, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And then the nursing clinical practical guidelines, which were published, which were published about a year ago, which sets the standards for nursing. We never had anything like that. International Conference on Treatment Standards, and what that is, that was, nobody was looking at what are the standards for treatment of people with MG and the drugs that are being used and so forth. So that conference has now been held, and I believe the results of that are now in publication, and you'll be able to get copies of these things. The International Conference on Preclinical Therapeutics. Linda Kushner, who is on the MSAB and is a researcher, not a clinician, but a researcher. We've broadened that MSAB to include researchers. And she organized this international conference last year. And these are all conferences that we, the MGFA, have funded. And so they've put in place, or in the process of putting in place, the standards that are used for establishing preclinical trials. So if you think about it, preclinical standards are in place, clinical standards are in place, nursing standards are in place. So now we're dealing with the patient, not the research. And then International Malignancy Thymectomy Interscope, because all of those of you who have had thymectomies or contemplating of it, there's a whole series of questions related to malignancy and whether the thymectomy should be done or not done. And in fact, that's another area where we've spent a lot of time, which is the new thymectomy trial, which will finish up this year. So a lot going on, a lot of moving parts here. The genome-wide study, which we've talked about in the past, this was our first significant research investment was $300,000 with Dr. Dan Drockman at Johns Hopkins, and it was a joint project with the NIH. And that has produced some very interesting research results, and Dan is in the process of starting to explore some of that data. The thymectomy trial, the International Thymectomy Trial, which is looking at the value, if you will, of thymectomies, that data will be reported out later this year. Rituximab clinical trial, which is ongoing. I'm sure you've all heard about it. We've sent out notices to let you know about it, along with other ones to join in. And then there's the MGFA ABF Fellowship, the American Brain Foundation. And that's a really important one. We've funded 2 fellows. Jeff Guptill from Duke, who was our first fellow, that's a $300,000 program, gives the foundation credit for helping him, and this is about leverage. For those of you here last year, I talked about leverage. That grant that we gave him and the work that he did positioned him to get a significant NIH grant, which is a very tough one to get. I think it's an R3 grant that gives him 5 additional years of funding to carry on the work that we helped fund initially. So again, a lot of things happening there. This is just a quick look at the numbers. You are aware of the high impact research projects that we started several years ago, and you can read them as well as I can. If you look at the years, the dollars have increased. We've been at it since 2011. We've got over $350,000 invested there. And then a new program that we just rolled out this year is transformative research, $250,000 grant. And the idea here is to take that early research and transform it, make it practical, take it to the next level. And so we're looking forward to funding our first project this year in that area. Patient registry is critical. We have over 1,500 people registered for the registry. If you are not, we really encourage you to do it. It is one of the keys to getting a handle on MG. And it is critical for researchers, clinicians, and pharmaceutical companies to not have access to your specific data, but to see aggregate data so that they can make judgment calls as to where they're spending dollars and how they're spending dollars. And then there are the partnerships. This is really critical to the foundation. We've established, and I think most of you know it, a great partnership with Walgreens, CSL Behring, Accellacare, Valiant, Coram, and the NIH. Those are not only dollars, but that's information that we're sharing, never shared before. And you'll meet some of those people. They're here at this conference and have supported us on a lot of other issues. The MG Walks, I know you're all familiar with those. And again, this is another quick look. It doesn't have on this chart the 2015, and I'll share that with you in a minute. But just through 2014, we've done 97 walks over a 3-year period and raised $2.5 million, and a lot of awareness. In 2015, we've got 35 walks planned. Revenue is projected at $850. 8 walks are completed so far, and when I checked the number this morning, it's no longer $236,000, it's over $250,000. And I expect by this evening, when we give out the awards for walk participation, that number will be even greater. And that's something you really ought to take a lot of credit for. So let's take a quick look at the numbers, because that's how we're doing. It's an easy way to look at it. And if you look at what's coming up here, we're talking about MG growth. And I'm talking about it in terms of unrestricted net assets, which is the blue line, average revenues, and annual research dollars. Now, if you think about that, that's a pretty impressive graph. Because, first of all the lines are going in the right direction, and research looks low, and it is. But keep in mind, until recently, we didn't have a lot of money to spend in research. And 2, you don't just spend money to spend it. It's our responsibility and the MSCB's responsibility to look at those proposals and make sure they are consistent with our research agenda. And so that's why that number may not look as big as you might like it to be, but it is going in the right direction. And this is the other critical one. You see the top line, you want to look at the bottom line. We have been focusing for a good number of years on driving the cost of the administration of the organization down. And I think you can see that here. And you'll hear more about that from Beth later. So we're expanding our programs and we're expanding their reach. We're involving the underserved and the underinvolved. We're engaging volunteers and teams focused on key programs. We're focusing on the whole United States, not just parts. You saw big gaping holes. We're focusing on young people. We're focusing on parents, children, because those are the next generations. That's who we need to start to focus on. And we're focusing on the use of new media. Twitter is one example of that. The MGFA website, hopefully you're all familiar with it. I mentioned it before. We are in the process of a redesign of that website. We did it about 4 years ago. Technology moves fast. It's already looking outdated. It's not as user-friendly as we thought it was 4 years ago. That's all now changing. And I'm going to just show you a couple of the concepts that are being looked at. And these are just purely design concepts, and I think you'll see it's a lot fresher kind of look. In this website will now be usable on your mobile devices as well, so it's not just going to your computer to do that. And then you've got the MGFA Twitter account, which I've already talked about, and you can tweet about the conference, as I suggested earlier. And I'm going to show you a very short video. I mean, you can see as much of it as you want. But a patient in Florida, Sandra Harden, started a Twitter by actually putting together a poster with herself. She hand-printed poster that she held up talking about her MG. And she posted it on Twitter and Facebook. And there are now 6.2 million impressions, people who have looked at that. That's pretty good. And for those of you who watch TV, there is a program called Empire, which I don't watch, but in any case, Ms. Henson, who is one of the key actresses on the show, has tweeted about this particular poster thing, and she has over 3 million people looking at her tweets, if I'm using the terms correctly, about this process. So now we're going to show you a short version of this video.
I'm not surprised, not everything lasts. I've broken my heart so many times I stopped keeping track. Talk myself in, I talk myself out. I get all worked up, then I let myself down. I tried so very hard not to lose it. I came up with a million excuses. I thought of every possibility. I know someday that it'll all turn out. You'll make me work so we can work to work it out. And I promise you, kid, that I'll give so much more than I get. I just haven't met you yet. I might have to wait, I'll never give up. I guess it's half timing and the other half's luck. Wherever you are, whenever it's right, you'll come out of nowhere and into my life. And I know that we can be so amazing. And baby, your love is gonna change me. And now I can see every possibility. And somehow I know that it'll all turn out. You'll make me work so we can work to work it out. And I promise you, kid, I'll give so much more than I get. I just haven't met you yet. They say all's fair in love and war, but I won't need to fight it. We'll get it right, we'll be united. And I know that we can be so amazing, and being in your life is gonna change me. And now I can see every single possibility. And someday I know it'll all turn out, and I'll work to work it out. Promise you, kid, I'll give more than I get, than I get, than I get, than I get. Oh, you know it'll all turn out, and you'll make me work so we can work to work it out. And I promise you can to give so much more than I get. Yeah, I just haven't met you yet. I just haven't met.
John Kennedy said it, things do not happen, things are made to happen. And things are made to happen by individuals who take responsibility for themselves and don't look for somebody else to do it. And again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but you know, these are some of the things that we've talked about, some of the things that we're doing. What's the next decade hold? I think that's the important message here. We are, and I think you see it, expanding our programs. We're expanding our outreach. We're improving communications, and God knows we need to do that. And we're building our donor support. That's a cycle, and you got to keep it going. New fundraising programs, and you'll hear a little bit about this tonight. Team End Endurance, MG. This is not, it's a program, it's a new fundraising and awareness program geared to athletes. You need to participate by getting people to do it. Rich will talk about it, Rich Mouch will talk about it this evening. Very successful program. It's a pilot program. Rich himself entered a half marathon and raised over $13,000. So, you know, when you see Rich throughout the day today or tonight, thank him. I mean, he's really kicked this off, and the board has approved it now to go into a full-blown program. And then a special thank you really to our sponsors here, Walgreens, who's been with us from the beginning, Alexion, AlexaCare, Biofusion. That group continues to grow. That's what makes these conferences a success. And sort of as I leave my role as chairman of the foundation, you know, I thought back about it for a while, and I think that sort of sums it up. I like the dreams of the future better than the history of the past. The history is really prologue. It's the future that you have to look to, and it's the future that you have to make for yourselves. So that's sort of the state of the foundation and my little lecture for the day. Thank you. The state of the foundation is over. Barry's raising a good point. He's concerned about the older population, and I thought I made that clear at the beginning. We're trying to deal with the whole spectrum, but we are required to look at tools for the younger generation and bring them on board. So as we're adding new tools, some of the older population has adopted them, some haven't, but we're continuing to do the same old things that we did, and I don't mean that in a negative way. The foundation focus is still there. All of these things we're continuing to do and continuing to improve on, and will do so. But at the same time, we have a responsibility to look back and to bring forward. So it's a good point, and we do pay attention to that. So again, thank you all.